Hello and welcome to today's news report on the war in Ukraine. You're listening to the account with the latest for day 342. Today nothing in the news really stood out. I grouped all the minor updates into the usual situation inside Ukraine with another Budanov interview, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments, including the announcement on the latest US aid package with 150-kilometer range rockets. Nothing of importance was reported out of the occupied territories, so I will be skipping that part. And to start the report, as usual, the flashpoints along the front first. Bakhmut. The General Staff reported repelled attacks on Krasnahora, Bakhmut, Klishchivka and Ivanivsk. Russia's aim is to cut off the main roads into Bakhmut to put the town into an operational encirclement. How successful a possible encirclement will be cannot be assessed yet, however the roads should barely be usable as it is, since Russia has fire control over them. Vuhledar. Despite massive losses corroborated by video evidence, Russia continues its assault on the settlement. Overall, the intensity of attacks has slowed down. However, it does not seem that Russia will abandon plans to capture the city despite the losses. Now for a look at all the minor news out of Ukraine. Air raid sirens sounded throughout Ukraine 3 times today. The first air raid alarm was due to the takeoff of Russian MiG-31K from Belarus, the Ukrainian Air Force reported. But it is not clear what caused the other 2. Analysts claim that not a single MiG-31K takeoff was recorded. The head of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, stated in another interview that roughly 326,000 Russians are currently fighting in Ukraine. He also has denied the notion that the advance of Ukrainian forces into Crimea would provoke Russian President Vladimir Putin to deploy nuclear weapons against Ukraine. A source close to Budanov also claimed that he has survived 10 assassination attempts. One of the reasons is that Russia blames him for the attack on the Crimean Bridge in October. Additionally, his rise to one of the youngest generals in Ukrainian history is believed to be due to an operation in 2016 in Crimea in which a lieutenant colonel of the FSB was killed. Budanov is believed to have been one of the special operators working behind enemy lines. Neither denying nor confirming the claim, Budanov simply stated, "Something happened, and all of the attempts on my life started after that." Ukraine ranked 116th out of 180 countries in the Corruption Perception Index 2022, rising 6 places in the rating compared to last year when it ranked 122nd. Ukraine received 33 points out of 100 possible in the Corruption Perception Index, meaning Ukraine earned 1 additional point. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, stated during a briefing that Ukraine will receive 120 to 140 modern Western tanks in the first batch. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Just before the planned visit to Volgograd by Russian President Vladimir Putin, the road signs at all main entrances to the city have temporarily been changed with Stalingrad signs. Russia and Belarus have announced a 2-week joint staff training. The training is designed to create battle plans based on experiences gathered in recent armed conflicts and ensure the military security of the Union state. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy head of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, has proposed to legalize theft of intellectual property. According to him, Western sanctions failed miserably, and all that is left is to legalize the use of Western intellectual property without proper licenses or paid royalties. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. According to the defense ministers of Austria and Hungary, both countries have agreed not to send weapons to Ukraine. The Croatian President Zoran Milanovic, who is well known for his anti-Ukraine statements, criticized the decision by NATO countries to send tanks to Ukraine, calling it mad. Regarding the tanks promised to Ukraine, he said, "German tanks in Russia? Good luck with that." He also stated that Crimea will never be Ukrainian again. US President Joe Biden said that he would not send American fighter jets to Ukraine, even though the US is ramping up military assistance in the form of artillery and tanks. However, the response may not be the final stance of Washington, since high-level discussions on arming Kyiv with jets are yet to be held. The US Transportation Command, US Transcom, has announced the shipment of the first batch of 60 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. Human Rights Watch has called on Ukraine to investigate the alleged use of rocket-fired anti-personnel landmines by the Ukrainian military. Russian forces have repeatedly used anti-personnel mines and committed atrocities across the country, but this does not justify Ukrainian use of these prohibited weapons, says Steve Goose, Arms Divisions Director at Human Rights Watch. France will donate 12 more Caesar self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine and help to train Ukrainian soldiers. France is also considering Ukraine's request for fighter jet pilot training. The US is preparing over $2 billion worth of military aid for Ukraine, including anticipated longer-range rockets. According to an official, $1.725 billion will come from the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which permits the White House to procure weapons from industry as opposed to existing US stocks. The funds will be used to purchase the ground-launched small-diameter bomb weapon system, which has a range of 150 kilometers. The United States has no evidence that US funds are being misused in Ukraine, but will continue to work closely with the Ukrainian authorities to ensure appropriate safeguards are in place to prevent corruption. Conflicting information regarding discussions for a possible F-16 transfer to Ukraine are coming out of Poland. Poland is not discussing giving its F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, the Polish Deputy Defense Minister wrote on Twitter. On the other hand, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said, "The country's authorities are discussing the issue of Poland's F-16 jet supply to Ukraine with NATO allies." And now for the intelligence report segment, starting as usual with the UK Ministry of Defense. In the last 3 days, Russia has likely developed its probing attacks around the towns of Pavlivka and Vuhledar into a more concerted assault. The settlements lie 50 kilometers southwest of Donetsk city, and Russia previously used the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade in an unsuccessful assault on the same area in November 2022. Elements of the 155th are again involved as part of an at least brigade-sized force, which has likely advanced several hundred meters beyond the small Kashlahach River, which marked the front line for several months. Russian commanders are likely aiming to develop a new axis of advance into Ukrainian-held Donetsk Oblast and to divert Ukrainian forces from the heavily contested Bakhmut sector. There is a realistic possibility that Russia will continue to make local gains in the sector. However, it is unlikely that Russia has sufficient uncommitted troops in the area to achieve an operationally significant breakthrough. Moving on to the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. According to the researchers, Russia probably has not used all its reserves yet and is strengthening its troops in the Donbas in preparation for an offensive. This assessment is based on Western, Ukrainian and Russian sources, which continue to indicate that Russia is preparing for an imminent offensive, confirming the Institute's assessment that an offensive in the coming month is the most likely course of action. Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary, stated on January 30th that there are no indications that Russia is preparing to negotiate for peace and that all indicators point to the opposite. Ivan Timoshko, head of the Council of Reservists of the Ukrainian Ground Forces, relatedly stated that Russian forces are strengthening their grouping in the Donbas as part of an anticipated offensive. Russian military bloggers also continue to indicate that the Russian information space is setting conditions for a Russian offensive, and Russia has not yet deployed all its reserves. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The Russian Federation continues to wage full-scale armed aggression against Ukraine. The enemy does not abandon its intention to destroy the critical infrastructure of our state, strikes at civilian objects and homes of the civilian population. The enemy continues to conduct offensive actions in the Liman and Bakhmut direction, suffering heavy losses. The enemy conducts unsuccessful offensive actions in the Avdiivka and Novopavlivka directions. In the Kupiansk and Zaporizhia directions, the enemy is defending previously captured lines. The occupiers sent filtering and counter-sabotage measures to the temporarily occupied territories of the Kherson region. Thus, the Russian occupying forces have restricted entry and exit from the settlement of Ulyanivka. Local residents are being searched and mobile phones are being checked. In Donetsk, among servicemen of the Russian occupation forces and mercenaries of the so-called Wagner PMC, the number of particularly dangerous infections has increased significantly, which may be related to the lack of normal sanitary and hygienic conditions in the location of the enemy units. And with that, another report is finished. Should you be interested in any of the articles I mentioned, I included links to them in the description. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You are listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.